Welcome to the Tanked podcast. In this week's episode, Anahid Nersessian reads from her book Keats Odes, A Lover's Discourse, a love letter to the romantic poet disguised as a work of literary criticism.
No, no, go not to Lethe, neither twist wolfsbane, tight-rooted for its poisonous wine, nor suffer thy pale forehead to be kissed by nightshade, ruby grape of Proserpine. Make not your rosary of yew berries, nor let the beetle nor the death moth be your mournful Psyche, nor the downy owl a partner in your sorrow's miseries. For shade to shade will come too drowsily and drown the wakeful anguish of the soul. But when the melancholy fit shall fall sudden from heaven like a weeping cloud that fosters the droop-headed flowers all and hides the green hill in an April shroud, then glut thy sorrow on a morning rose, or on the rainbow of the salt sand wave, or on the wealth of globed peonies. Or if thy mistress some rich anger shows, imprison her soft hand and let her rave, and feed deep, deep upon her peerless eyes. She dwells with beauty, beauty that must die, and joy whose hand is ever at his lips bidding adieu, and aching pleasure nigh, turning to poison while the bee-mouth sips. Aye, in the very temple of delight, veiled melancholy has her sovereign shrine, though seen of none save him whose strenuous tongue can burst joy's grape against his palate fine. His soul shall taste the sadness of her might, and be among her cloudy trophies hung. I was in the woods and I hadn't gotten the memo. I wanted my melancholy atypical, non-conformist, kinky. In other words, I didn't want any melancholy at all, but my circumstances made it impossible because I had to share them with someone else. When we met, this person looked at me, to borrow a description from Doris Lessing, with the expert assessment of possibilities by a prisoner observing a new jailer. This was worrisome. It gave me the feeling that I was about to be played on an old but well-oiled machine, and besides, the last thing I wanted was to represent the impossibility of freedom, or to represent freedom at the expense of being free myself. Because I was ambivalent, I collected reasons to remain so. Still, these would evaporate when held up next to my vague but no less stubborn belief that everything was going to be fine in some moderately distant future that would be difficult to get to, but worth it. What could I do? The worst seemed inevitable and the best necessary. The upshot is that I wanted to be alone and was lucky enough to have been invited where I could be, an island with a new and irrepressible urge to sink. There I go for a walk in the rain when it is too warm for November and get a thorn a little over a centimeter long stuck in the middle finger of my right hand, just above and to the left of my top knuckle. It goes completely underneath the skin and flattens into a dingy, horizontal line. At first, I try to ignore it, but by the time I get back to the place I am staying, my finger is purple and enormous. I get on the internet and find what you might expect: wars and rumors of wars, the certainty of a bacterial infection, septicemia, and death. All of this, by the way, is true. The island is a real place. The woods there are real, and I really did get a thorn stuck in my finger. None of this is written in code. I'm sorry I can't be more specific, won't use names or say the year, who was president, or how old I was. Honestly, I'm not trying to be coy, just decent, since this is not only my story to tell. Every person I mention is a person with other people in what might be called the background of this writing, and that includes me. I am also a person with other people in the background of the intimacies that jump forward to become, even briefly, the whole of the world. A friend tells me he thinks that I think I'm laying my cards on the table when in fact I'm just being skittish and exasperating, that this is a chronic problem for me that I try to pass off as shyness, but that he recognizes, because he recognizes it in himself, as evidence of a hard heart, loath to leave itself unguarded. That hurts, but maybe he's right. Maybe what I imagine as discretion is just another way of trying to cut losses, to avoid the same risks I want others to take for me. As the sky moves from black to gray and grayer, I am drenched in sweat with an arm on fire, mortified by self-pity. It has not escaped my attention that the thorn is absurdly on the nose, more death moth than sand wave. The air is still too warm as I travel onward to visit a friend, different friend, and help sterilize bottles for her breast milk. We turn on all the lights in her apartment and put on The Fall and Yusef Lateef, sing to her baby, all of it's bad, but it's not all bad. Later I take a train to another city where I see a friend, different friend, and argue with him badly. I am glad of it now, my stupid wound, which feels comparatively clean and neat, and I am embarrassed by the force of my desire to have him touch absolutely nothing that is mine, certainly not the hand still pulsing with its vegetable stigma. The resistance of the wood varies, warns Bart, depending on the place where we drive in the nail. In the last city, everyone acts as though it's Christmas morning. I tell my hosts about the thorn, and they take it so seriously I want to kiss them in this delicate, disordered country where so much, it seems, is fatal. Around this same time, I begin receiving messages from an old flame who is in, for him, an unusual state of disinhibition. I would call it harassment, except that it's welcome. It has that quality of irritated insistence. He wants me to know I've ruined his life, but he's always been like this, a great wet claw of hostility for whom spite is the sincerest proof of tenderness. He sends me digital photographs of ruined sidewalks, drugs, his face against a pillow. Soon we are trading lines from a Stephen Rotifer poem, a translation of François Villon that begins, "If the woman who I used to love constantly and unconstantly, but who only wronged and hurt me, finally fucking me over completely, had only leveled with me from the start and told me what she wanted, but no way, I probably wouldn't have stayed with her. I probably would have been free all this time." It's fresh air, this person, this poem, this frankness, and now, instead of globed peonies, I am staring at a picture of his dick. All of this happens in the sidebar, or perhaps the gutter of my melancholy. It is scar tissue growing around the thorn, burying its sticker. I am grateful for the way these obscenities steady me since, like Lauren Berlant, there is nothing I like more than watching someone use their freedom. I am grateful, too, for their burlesque of the other love, for when the old flame vows to slap me and stuff my shirt into my mouth, it loosens the secret of that relationship, at whose heart lies the radiant wish of two people to bear everything for each other, but which has lately sagged into an actually degrading ritual of provocation and rebuke. Once the jailer, I'm now the object of an unflinching rhetoric of criminalization. Everything I do is wrong. It comes easily to me to ask for forgiveness, but even though I really do mean it and really do want it, I'm also getting tired of this nonsense. If love is anything not laid waste by this world, it is free. Mine is. Beneath all uncertainties, it is sacred in the way of a riot, like the very idea of song. It has to be dragged kicking and screaming even from the scene of its final insult, for which I too am responsible, not least because I greet with furious exultation the moment it all goes to pieces and I abandon hope and us. From various corners I hear I have been characteristically insensible or clueless, as well as hypocritical, beguiling, and cruel. No one seems convinced of what I know to be true about my love, that it was not wanted for what it was, but for the pain it could guarantee. Months later, I will be out to dinner with two men, one of whom will tell a story about the time he lost his head over someone he describes as a mesmerizing nymphomaniac. The story turns on a dialogue with his analyst, whom he tries to persuade that women like this don't grow on trees. For the men who need them, the analyst replies, they do. We murmur and cluck over the exactness of this insight, congratulate one another on becoming adults no longer in thrall to our own worst impulses. Still, I, who am not a nymphomaniac, cannot pretend the retort doesn't sting, that I don't hear it as a curse in the form of a question. What kind of woman am I? What about snow, or the memory of snow? In which room does it belong? Before the woods, I wrote down the phrase, "In my fantasies, you pulled the pleasure out of me like a thorn, and I am finally empty, free." Now I admit I miss the endlessness of imagining us, but not its terrors, and I make sure to hold those close. Every morning, I touch my fear to make sure it's still there. If anybody asks me or wonders why I badmouth love this way, they'll have to figure it out for themselves. It's death that teaches you to speak of everything.
To hear more podcasts from Tank, you can subscribe on all major podcast platforms or follow us on SoundCloud. The theme music for this podcast is by Himera.